Good morning. This is Greg Henschel, and I'm with the Office of Career Technical and Adult Education at the U.S. Department of Education. Wanted to get out of the really quick here, but just thank our panelists, Brock, Caitlin, and Donnie. They'll be introduced, and as always, grateful for the close cooperation with Michael Britt Crane and Emily DeRocco at DOD. And we'll see what Michael has to say this afternoon.
Nothing much, just a thank you to our panelists. I'm very excited for the topic. This is our second in the series on virtual environments and applications in career and technical education. So very excited for the presentation and discussion here today. And thank you, of course, to Emily and Greg and to the team at RTI for helping to put this all together.
Hi, good afternoon. So excited to be here with everybody. Really looking forward to the conversation today. My name is Caitlin Cutshall. I'm currently the Director of Economic Development at Transfer. Prior to this role, I really focused on building and leading the Jumpstart Alabama initiative, which is a public-private partnership that we'll talk a little bit further about later in the presentation. Really got asked to come on board with Transfer to build ecosystems across the U.S. and would love to introduce Brock Kelly and Donnie Jones. Brock, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself first, and then Donnie after that.
Sure. Good afternoon. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you guys for allowing us to join. My name is Brock Kelly. I'm the president of Lurleen B. Wallace Community College in Southeast Alabama. Before this role, I actually served in a couple of roles in workforce development across the state of Alabama in K-12 as well as the community college system. I'll pass it over to Donnie.
Well, I'm Donnie Jones. I'm the executive director for West Alabama Works, also the COO at the West Alabama Chamber of Commerce. Involved in a lot of things across the state in workforce development, also serve on the executive committee for the State Workforce Board.
Thanks, guys. So we'll go ahead and jump right in. So this is really just a quick overview of who we envision our prosperity pioneers in Alabama is. These are really individuals from across the state that have really went out of their way to identify opportunities, innovation, to really build this career exploration pathway and training that allows people to be more successful throughout the state. This is really just kind of our story. We want to walk through how we got to where we are today. I'll obviously ask Brock and others to give their thoughts on their most impacted areas. So we got started in Alabama. AIDT came to us with just 3 overarching issues. AIDT is a statewide training agency that really supports recruiting new industrial customers and expanding customers and just workforce and job placement. In that, they really came to us and said, you know, we're having difficulty, one, identifying people that can go into these skilled trade and manufacturing jobs. 2, once those people get on the job, they have no skills that align with the actual positions that they're going into, which then leads them to walk straight in the front door and right out the back door. So how can we really figure out, one, helping Alabamians and people across the U.S. to be able to be more successful in picking their career pathway that does not always lead to a 4-year degree, and then also getting trained and placed in those jobs so that they can have a sustainable wage long term. From there, we partnered directly with Lockheed Martin and really got brought into this conversation of the problem that they were having and seeing with retention rates. So from their contractors, they were seeing about 30%, and we'll kind of talk a little bit further about that in detail. But this really started with precision measurement. So in manufacturing, we heard that there were just some issues of understanding calibrators and adding and subtracting fractions and anything within that precision measurement realm. And we built a virtual reality simulation where trainees could actually learn those skills prior to getting on the job. From there, 20 people started the training program. Of course, people were like, okay, that's great. And these people actually do these skills now. All 20 of them were hired by Lockheed Martin. From that 30% retention rate, it then went to 93%. So I do want to kick it to Brock now. He was very influential in the Charles Henderson High School. When he was still with the high school, he's obviously said that he's been in multiple different locations in the past few years, but Brock would love to kind of hear your story on Charles Henderson and how that got started.
Yeah, we were actually running some workforce development programs at Charles Henderson High School. At the time, I was the the principal there, and we were doing the Ready to Work, which is a soft skill training. We had implemented the MSSC training, and then I was looking at trying to do some recruitment for that workforce development program. We partnered with Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin came in and we did a pre-employment training that we tacked on to our workforce development program with MSSC and Ready to Work. And they told me about their partnership with Transfer VR. I pulled Transfer VR in for one as a recruitment tool for our students, our high school students. And the second reason I pulled them in is I was looking at a way that we could decrease the time spent in certain modules within MSSC, within Ready to Work, within our workforce pre-employment training with Lockheed, decrease that time so that we could get through every one of those curriculums. And Transfer VR and the virtual reality goggles was an answer to that. So that's kind of how we embedded it at Charles Henderson High School.
Awesome. Thanks, Brock. Since that, they have hired almost 200 people with Lockheed Martin. Again, that retention rate is around 93% after 6 months. So you're really seeing just an exponential increase, honestly, to their bottom line and their return on investment from the employees that they are hiring. From there, we again partnered with AIDT and Toyota Mazda for an incumbent worker training curriculum. I will say this one was really interesting. Obviously, pre-COVID, they actually ended up taking these headsets to high schools, and they had lines out the door because people and students were so excited to just get to try the headsets, which then allowed more people to get to talk to Toyota Mazda and actually allowing them to say, hey, this is what you get to do. Like, this is the type of training that you're going to go through. This is exciting. This is fun. This is not your typical manufacturing job that you have in your mind of it's dirty and miserable. And that's kind of the stereotype that we really wanted to move away from when we started building Jumpstart Alabama. So there is actually an initiative at the state level called Success Plus. We are trying to add 500,000 skilled labor by 2025. That is Governor Ivey's goal. And really in that, we started pulling together AIDT, the community college system, Department of Ed, regional workforce councils, and of course, the most important part is business and industry to really start to brainstorm how do we build an effective classroom to career pipeline. Starting all the way down in the middle school, all the way through people who are unemployed, underemployed, displaced, people reentering from correctional facilities, and then how can we help them be more successful long-term? So from there, again, this Jumpstart Alabama pilot project was created. We had COVID in the middle of it, which was fantastic. We thought we were going to deploy in the K-12 system. We ended up completely changing and going into the community college system to start, because we really wanted to make sure that we could help those that were impacted by COVID-19 through the difficult time by upskilling, retraining, so that they could then be more successful when these manufacturing positions started to open back up. From there, it has just expanded exponentially across the state. I do want to kick it to Donnie because he has been very influential in making sure and driving this modern manufacturing class that he has to really support the 4 OEMs throughout our state. So Donnie, do you want to give a high level overview of what that program looks like now with your team?
Absolutely. One of the things that we really saw as we begin to speak to our industries, and particularly Mazda, Toyota, Honda, Hyundai, and then Mercedes-Benz, which is located here in Tuscaloosa County, we really began to ask the question, what is your biggest needs? And as we looked at that, the key indicators of that was, we need people with soft skills that have, basic knowledge of employability skills, but also basic knowledge of manufacturing. And so what we began to do is we went through a 6-month Kaizen event and actually created modern manufacturing. And when we rolled it out for Mercedes-Benz, every student that they got out of the program, they said, this is exactly what we need. And so when you begin to look at our education system, and we looked across the state and in the Southeast, there really wasn't a program built for entry-level production. It was more industrial maintenance, and the list goes on, welding and things of that nature. So this program was built to really meet the needs of entry-level employees. In the state of Alabama, when you look at industrial maintenance, there was about 13,000 jobs. When you look at productions, over 200,000. So those are the kind of things that we really started pivoting and focusing on. And then, of course, Caitlin and their partnership through Jumpstart, we already had a relationship and knew the outcomes of what we had seen. So when we started writing for the governor's office to put in the budget, the launch of modern manufacturing, of course, Transfer VR was a part of that. And there's a couple of things that's very important there. Number one, as Caitlin has spoken about, it's not only the outcomes and the retention of the material that we've seen grow exponentially, it also helps market those types of courses to get students excited and interested into venturing in to those career technical programs. And so when you look at all of that combined, it was a great partnership with Transfer VR, with the state of Alabama and our regional councils, and then our K-12 system. So we'll be launching about 16 high schools this year. We have 8 already launched in our region, but across the state. And Transfer VR is going to be a very important part of it, because it's also helping us see that using virtual reality, we're able to launch quickly up front and be able to do technical training without the heavy expense of the classroom or the lab space. So those are other great opportunities using virtual reality that can help schools to launch quicker and get more students involved and engaged.
Awesome. Thanks, Donnie. So I know that we briefly talked about this, but the numbers really do speak for themselves. So if you're looking at the number of participants that have went through the virtual reality training, 100% of those people have completed that training, 100% were offered jobs, 100% started, and 93% are still employed after 6 months. To have a program that is still showing that much success after 3 years is incredible, especially just from a business retention rate, return on investment for these businesses, and making sure that we can also help our economy grow and be successful, not only in Alabama, but other states as well. So when we first started, we mentioned that we were in 5 different locations. You can see that there are hotspots now across the entire state. So we're really expanding not only urban communities, but also rural. I would actually say that we have seen more impact within rural communities, because a lot of these rural communities do not have the capacity or funding to actually buy millions of dollars of equipment for these students to be trained on. And virtual reality allows us to provide that resource for them to still be able to see what that job would look like, and then also get trained in the needed skills that they would need to have to be on the job there. I will say one of the most powerful examples that I have seen of this so far is with Donnie Jones in West Alabama. We will talk a little bit more about it, but he has taken these headsets and started to bring them around all of his high schools to really bring awareness to these different career pathways that do not lead to a 4-year degree. You can be successful, and we want to make sure that we're showing our students and our youth within the Alabama education system that a 4-year degree is not the only way that is a path to success. So from a job placement standpoint, you can see just the increase over each year. In 2019, it was 84 job placements. In 2020, it was 179. We saw a small downtick just at the beginning of this year due to COVID, but obviously a lot of that is starting to really ramp back up. There's unemployment signs everywhere that I look. So I think that you're really starting to see people, the increase in training, and then also increase in job placement throughout Alabama right now. And then these are just a couple examples of the partners that have hired some of these students going through this curriculum. I am happy to share after this an entire list of what that looks like. We are expanding across the US. So we also are looking at working with Boeing and others to really build out these strategic training simulations to help people get jobs. And then the one thing that we did not envision that when we first started all of this was the impact that career exploration would have just on our entire K-12 system and the community college system throughout the state of Alabama. You can clearly see the ramp up of how many people are actually going through the career exploration modules. We have 23 different simulations right now. It spans from hospitality to construction to advanced manufacturing. In 2022, we're really excited to see some healthcare come out and also some IT come out. So that's just for future reference. But again, I think that what's so powerful about this is that we're able to expose students to different career pathways that they can move into, not getting a four-year degree with millions of thousands of dollars of debt that will pay $75,000 and above starting out.
Caitlin, I hate to interrupt you.
I was going to say, Donnie, do you want to hit there?
This part really excites us. Just to let you know, we just got a report added to that last week. We have hit over 1,100 students in less than 4 weeks that have gone through this program. So the impact is absolutely phenomenal. We do Worlds of Work, which is what we call Disney World for workforce development, which is a hands-on, but this is really taking it to the next level, and we're getting feedback, and our teachers are saying, hey, can you come back in? Matter of fact, we have had almost every school interested in purchasing headsets of their own so that they can run this exploration all the time in their school systems, and not just by our team visiting those schools. So we've gotten phenomenal feedback. But Caitlin, I wanted you to know that your last second quarter number needs to shoot all the way through that that slide deck.
Yes, it definitely will. I know we're constantly looking at it. We have dashboards, again, that we share with not only our partners, but internally, just to make sure that we are striving towards our mission this year, which is getting 50,000 people on a career track. So we will definitely get those updated. I'm so excited. It's really impressive, Donnie, to see what you guys have accomplished in such a short amount of time. And we really do feel like, honestly, these students are benefiting because they're seeing occupations that they didn't know existed. One more thing that I just really want to highlight before we get into just a quick video and some question and answer is this really powerful community college, Wallace, that came in and created a Diesel by Distance program. The biggest thing here that we have seen is that they have really created an entirely distant program to help train people in diesel mechanics that leads to these jobs. So before these students ever complete the training, they actually are linked up with the Alabama Trucking Association, and they are aware of all the companies that are hiring people within this field. Brock, I would love for you to kind of talk about how this is really impactful from a community college system side quickly, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, from the community college standpoint, we're business and industry led. There's a big need within this industry across the state, and this was a way that the community college could pivot quickly with the job postings that were out there, especially during COVID, where we used to look at 10-year projections. Now we look more at the unique job postings, and there was a big need in this industry, especially diesel tech. And there's more, obviously, in manufacturing and industrial maintenance. We look at the job postings, and virtual reality was definitely a way during the COVID period, during the pandemic, that we could pivot quickly, get some non-credit training out there very quick, and adjust the way we instruct in our classrooms.
Yeah, so one thing that we haven't touched on a ton is just that business and industry drives everything that we do. So if we do not hear from business and industry that this is an occupation that they need, that they're screening for, that they can hire today, that's not something that we're looking at. So we go on site, understand what the process looks like, understand every single skill that they would actually need to know to be able to be successful on that job, take that back, incorporate it in virtual reality. We send out a variation of design scopes back to the team to make sure that we're not missing anything. They make sure that the actual things that we're calling out are correct from a verbiage standpoint. But that has been so powerful just to be able to quickly develop these training simulations, which typically take, Brock, I don't know, 2+ years to be able to implement.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So I'm going to show a quick video really quickly, and then we can go to question and answer. Right? That works.
Transfer's industry experts develop each skill's learning objectives to ensure alignment with standard industry practices. These experts, instructional designers, and developers collaborate to create engaging, effective, and authentic training simulations that build trainees' skills while addressing common misconceptions. A virtual coach guides trainees through a 10 to 15-minute supervised tutorial.
Some tools require regular calibration,
where they interact with realistic tools and environments to master their skills. Trainees develop the muscle memory they'll need on the job through hands-on interactions.
So that is awesome.
The fun one-on-one training motivates job seekers to learn their new skills through trial and error without peer judgment or embarrassment. The virtual coach is their personal mentor,
the space between the jaws should be just a bit smaller than the width of the strip bolt head,
checking for understanding and correcting the trainee when they make mistakes by responding to their actions through artificial intelligence.
That's not the right tool for this task.
After the guided tutorial, the trainee demonstrates their skill mastery through hands-on practice at their own pace. Trainees receive feedback from the virtual coach.
Keep the cardboard steady as you cut.
And can review the tutorial at any time.
Awesome.
Transfer's proprietary mastery algorithms track and analyze every trainee action to provide employers insight into a candidate's skills. After successfully mastering the simulations, job seekers confidently demonstrate their new skills to show employers they are job ready on day one. The job offer and acceptance completes the life-changing journey from classroom to well-paying career.
Awesome. So now I know we are getting started with some panel questions that we have for Donnie and Brock. Brock, I would really just kind of want to segue based on the community college system discussion that we were just talking about. Can you tell me how this pandemic has challenged the education to really transition into innovative, result-driven programs?
Yeah, Caitlin, before the pandemic, essentially all of our classes, especially in the CTE world, were face-to-face. The students had to come in, they had to do the labs, they had to sit in front of the teacher, really be hands-on. Well, then the pandemic hit and everything shut down, so everyone went home. And there were a lot of students who missed out on that opportunity to get the hands-on training and skills they needed to finish out their program. Virtual reality allowed us to get back into virtual labs. We were able to bring students in segments, spread them out, put the goggles on, get the training they needed, and move on to the next. It also allowed us to have multiple sites where we could get virtual labs in, and students were not bound by going to one specific location. So it definitely made us think innovatively, and in order to bring these students back to complete their pathway, virtual reality was a must during the pandemic. So that's kind of how we were able to work it.
Awesome. Yeah, there's definitely no gaps for challenges, I will say, within the workforce development space. So that leads me, Donnie, to my next question is, what is the largest challenge that we feel like we're facing right now in workforce development? And then what's the opportunity that we feel like we can really overcome to be more successful as just Alabama and as a state?
Well, I'll answer that in two ways, Caitlin. One is one of the greatest challenges we have in the state of Alabama is actually bodies. We have more jobs than we actually have individuals that can fill those jobs. And that is a great place to be in. If I put my chamber hat on, that's a phenomenal place to be in. When I put my workforce hat, it's, oh my gosh, but when we look at it, one of the biggest challenges is the integration of soft skills, essential skills, employability skills within our school systems. That would be nationally that I would see one of the biggest problems that we have in our education system. One of those is our young people are coming out and they really don't have a clue of what job performance, what teamwork, what constructive criticism, and the list goes on. So when we really are talking to employers, it's great that you have me somebody here that I can interview, but the majority of those individuals can't operate within the confines of work. And that's one of the big things that we really have to overcome as all of our partnerships begin to work and globally reach out into our community college systems, our K-12 systems. And that's one of the biggest issues that we probably have in the workforce community today, is not just skilled trades, it's actually getting people to keep a job once they get the job. So.
Yes. Emily, it looks like you may have a question. You raised your hand. I just want to confirm before.
Actually, I've never had the opportunity to raise my hand by an icon, and I just wanted to do that. No, I have two questions, actually. When Johnny and I last spoke, I remember so well his description of how to put together the right training program for your demanding employers. And as I recall, Donnie, it went something like, we took the Ready to Work program, threw out what we didn't want and kept what we did. We took the MSSC program, threw out what they didn't want and kept what we needed, and basically pieced together from available, all high quality content, the kind of program that you needed to be successful in Alabama. And number one, I just kind of wanted to confirm that process for those of our audience, our education workforce directors who are moving into regional interventions to develop educational pathways to fill gaps for in-demand jobs in regions across the country. Is it correct to say that your process and Transfer VR actually, in large measure, can use quality content that is already available rather than developing from scratch in order to respond to the competencies and skill requirements for your economy, for your employers, and for the jobs that are awaiting bodies by the thousands? That's number one. And then tied to that, who initially paid for this in Jumpstart Alabama? There are a lot of partners on the screen. Yes. There was reference to the state. And I know all of our folks are thinking this would be fabulous to bring in, but who pays?
Yes. So Donnie, let me do the pay one first, because I think that's a much quicker answer than maybe the question that she gave you. So this really was focused on the public-private partnership. We don't feel like from a braided funding standpoint that it could be successful any other way. So when we initially launched, we had Alabama Power, CamTech, and Altech, 3 business partners come to the table. And then you also had the Business Education Alliance come to the table from the public side. So we really did have this combination of public-private dollars to really pilot this program. As we have really expanded, you're seeing people get really creative with Perkins dollars, WIOA funding dollars, Workforce Board dollars, and then of course, business and industry are still really supporting from a financial standpoint. Obviously, at the beginning, we kind of talked about the governor's office is really looking to also deploy a statewide initiative with the governor's budget. So we're really starting to see a lot more on that public side now that we have proven results, especially from the private side, because they're saying, wow, I'm spending millions of dollars on training, and this is actually working. So that's really the braided funding that we've seen, Emily, throughout the state right now.
And Emily, I'll jump in on that as well, because even when you look at the funding process, it deals with the training and the development of programs too. We're doing the same thing with the new launch of modern manufacturing, where the school systems have to have as much skin in the game as the governor's fund that actually is funding this along with the regional councils. So that's what systemic change really looks like, so that they understand that this is not just a free program that we're putting out there. It's something that systemically has to change the way that we're doing education. So specifically to your question, over the years, what we have seen and working with the K-12 and our career technical programs is, number one, what will happen is education will develop a program, and then they have a think tank group, which, they'll lay that out and say, does this meet your needs? Well, industry is begging for more career technical education. They're begging for K-12 to listen to them. So when you get them in the room and you say, does this look like what you need? Number one, they're just so happy that somebody is asking them, yes, does it have the word industrial maintenance in it? Oh, yes, we like that. And so we took a different approach, and we actually use the same process that they do on the line of a manufacturing plant. And that is what's called a Kaizen event. It's a process of strategy planning. And so as we went through that process strategy planning over a 6-month period, this was not just small potatoes where we had one meeting and said, let's take this out and put this in, and what do we think? We really strategically looked at it, and we used a lot of the great things that you're saying, but we integrated it all within. And the other part that's so powerful about this is the ready to work, which is your essential skills training. It's not day 1, day 2, day 3, here's the PowerPoints. We're actually teaching educators how to integrate those educational soft touch points into every part of the hands-on experience and the virtual. So the students are going through classroom credentials. They actually end up with about 4 or 5 credentials, a college degree in modern manufacturing, a track to apprenticeships, and an additional degree if they go into one of the higher level mechatronics in our automotive community or FAME program. They actually then can get 2 AS degrees, have multiple stackable credentials, and at the same time have a full-time job before they ever graduate high school. And so that's what's really powerful about this. But what's so cool about the Transfer VR is it jumpstarts them into everything. So they get the simulation before they get into the real world. And the other part is our industries are so excited about it. All of our classrooms have a brand new, in our region, have a brand new GLE, Mercedes GLE SUV sitting in every single classroom. And the hands-on is actually them tearing that car down every semester and building it back up with a brand new wiring harness. So that's the type of activity. But before they put their hands on a $150,000 car, they're going to go through Caitlin's Transfer VR, believe me, right? And so those are the ways that we're really starting to see some traction being built. And here's the big thing, Emily, that's really important when you ask this question, is because industry understands now that we're not only just bringing them to the table, we're engaging them and really listening. They are 100%. We have not bought a piece of equipment for any of those classrooms. Industry has paid for every single one. And that's how education should work. It should be a true partnership between the customer, which we don't look at education that way. We look at the child as the customer. When you look at the industry, the employer as the customer, that actually is a win for the child as well, because now look at what they're getting to experience. And a lot of these schools that we're talking about, this is happening is in rural poverty-stricken high schools that are being impacted, and these kids are finding jobs. I did see where somebody asked about demographic makeup. I will tell you this, in just our automotive tracks, not in the school systems, but overall in general, 80% of all of our placements in the last 2 years have been minorities, 80%. And we have placed thousands.
Yeah, and I do think, Emily, just kind of circling back to what Brock is doing, I think it's just really powerful to create these training programs and what the process looks like. Brock, can you kind of tell the team what we have done with the healthcare of how we started and where we're at right now to make sure that we are fully understanding what business and industry is needing, and then also aligning that with y'all's programs that exist now?
In meeting with Transfer and kind of getting their vision on how they want to kind of go forward with the healthcare, I have about 8 or 9 healthcare teachers and instructors that basically designed the entire program I went to them and said, what would an individual or a student need to what skills would they need from point A to point B from the time they come into school to the time they graduate, and all the clinicals, the hands-on clinicals that they have to go through, what will they need? And the instructors, their eyes lit up. They were super excited about having this opportunity to do this. And my group got on a call with Caitlin and Transfer VR's group, and my group was able to talk to another subject matter expert in, I think maybe Colorado or Oklahoma, and really compare lists so that, something in Alabama looks the same as it does in Colorado or Oklahoma. And hopefully in the next year, we will have healthcare as a pilot at LBW.
Yeah, thanks.
So I'd like to ask a follow-up question on the sort of product development process. And Donnie, I really like the way that you spoke to the integration of the human skills, the common employability skills throughout the process. I'm curious how the virtual reality elements integrate with traditional book learning or elements from other training programs, whether that's how those elements are woven together and how that works through I think of it as a product development process for a training curriculum, in that first stage of development, in the pilot deployment and testing, and then iteration thereafter. And maybe the healthcare case that you've already started to speak to would be maybe a good example to talk through that.
Yes, I will give a technical response from transfer side, and then I'll let Brock and Donnie kind of give the process side of things. So really what we do internally is we also map out how many jobs exist within that occupation that people are trying to build out a curriculum for. Because our biggest thing is, one, is this job actually in demand, not only in that state, but across the US? So obviously nurses is a huge one right now, RNs, med techs, things like that. Really, our process is doing a complete data analysis utilizing EMSI, which is an economic modeling tool that showcases jobs across the US and supply and demand gaps that also exist. We take a look at all of that data and information, and then we kind of come back with our partner and talk through what are the specific skills that you guys envision are needed for this person to get hired. From then, our team will actually come on site to business and industries from across multiple states. Sometimes it's very specific, like Bridgewater Interiors. They're an automotive manufacturing seat maker. Theirs is very specific, but with healthcare, that's multiple different visits to make sure that we are getting it accurate and correct for not only just one location, but multiple locations. From there, we provide a design layout. So we have artists on staff that kind of make up what this would look like within a virtual reality environment. And then it's just honestly a very intensive back and forth to make sure that everything is correct. So walking through each exact artist design and making changes, making adjustments. From there, it gets sent to our engineering team. And goes through a very similar process, except for it gets developed in virtual reality at that point, and then gets, again, shared back with business and industry and partners for approval. Then it will launch. So that's kind of the technical response, but would love, Donnie, for you to provide some insight on your side of things from workforce development.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, go ahead, Brock. I think you had something.
Well, I was just going to add on. Kayla, I'm correct when you guys align it with credentials, right? So you've aligned some of those industry credentials with the modules such as NCCER, such as EPA with HVAC. I'm correct in saying that, correct?
Yeah, so we also take a look at national standards and then kind of combine that with it as well.
Yeah. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point, because for example, what I was going to talk about is, Michael, to your question, how does that all look like when you take all this stuff that we're talking about, what does it look like when you walk into a classroom? And I will say this to anybody on the call. If any of you, we have people that fly in. We had somebody from Florida just this week. If you want to come down and see what we're talking about, we'd love to have you. Because one of the things that we always learn when somebody comes down is what are some of your best practices. So we learn from everyone that comes and looks at our program. But Michael, when you look at that, we just launched in the last couple of weeks. Caitlin hasn't even been down yet to see how we're integrating the headsets into modern manufacturing. But for example, before they go in and start looking at the KUKA robots and working on the automobile, they're going to go through. So you have a finite amount of equipment in each one of these areas. But the beauty of it is now you don't have standbys. What that means is we're maximizing every hour of every day in the classroom. So when we were in, matter of fact, I was there yesterday and we had a group from one of our community colleges taking a look at the program. You had students that were back in the other classroom that actually was going through the safety module while 5 of the kids were actually working in the lab on the car, and then they would go vice versa. So you're maximizing every hour because the majority of our schools do not have a 20,000 square foot lab for one course. That's the other thing to think about when you're looking at process. And that's what's so important about what we were using the Kaizen. When you look at the process flow of education as well, you're not only looking at, can I get a kid from point A to point B at the end of a semester? You're looking at, am I maximizing every minute of that day for all of our equipment so that I can get that kid as far as I possibly can in his knowledge so that he feels comfortable. The other thing that we're seeing, particularly with the transfer VR, is it is doing a lot for these young people and how they feel about themselves, their self-confidence, how they're moving forward. And you're taking a kid that was at risk at the beginning of a program and you're seeing them talk to you, look at you in the eye, tell you that they want to go into the next level of their education. And that's what I tell people all the time. What we're doing here is so different than so many places that we look, is because we are transforming the attitude and the character of young people. And that's something that nobody is really focused on. And we're seeing the needle move on the academic side, even more so because of the confidence that's being instilled in these young people. Because young people, we all know that because we're educators, you guys are, I'm just one that talks about it. But you either learn by sight or by touch. And we're finding that so many of our kids nowadays are just being lost in the education system. And when we engage them in the touch factor of education, their academics soar. So just a way that we integrate all that. I know that's a long answer, but as you can tell, I get excited about this stuff when we start talking about it.
Yes, and I do know we're kind of coming up on time here as well. I want to share one just last story, if that is okay, Greg, with you, just to kind of close out from our side. So there was actually a young female that was at Charles Henderson High School, and this is the perfect example of what we're trying to accomplish every day that I get up and get to do my job. She had no idea that manufacturing was an opportunity for her. She was able to put the headset on, go through career exploration, found out that she actually loved the skilled trades. She ended up getting hired by Lockheed Martin, who is now paying for her to go back to school to get an engineering degree. So like that is like so powerful to just see that pathway of, you know, she had no idea that that was even an option for her. And that is what we are trying to do by incorporating this to really expose students to different career pathways that lead them to these high paying jobs.
And Caitlin, I will mention this, that same girl, her dad was a doctor, her uncle's a doctor, her aunt's a doctor. She was wanting to be a doctor until she went into this classroom and saw what manufacturing is about, completely changed the trajectory of her life.
Yes, it's so powerful. It gives me chills, it makes me excited. So Greg, that is really what we had today. We can put our contact information in the chat box. So if people have more questions or want to reach out, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, well, I would like to take a few minutes to ask a couple questions, in part because your presentation and the whole way you're working contrasts very neatly with a presentation that we had a few weeks ago. You may have noticed in the title slide that this was virtual reality part 2. part one, we had our colleagues from Clemson University and MIT present work that they share. And all of their work is done just for the browser. So people could take the classes anywhere. And although we saw your video today, we saw it on the browser, that was just a projection for the screen, but actually your students are seeing something very different. They're in a full virtual reality immersion environment. I was taking notes on some of what you were sharing with us about how, you know, some of the schools are starting to acquire their own headsets. And it sounded like there was a couple things. One is it worth it? Is kind of the question. It's kind of the bottom line thing. Is it worth it investing in something where, you know, unlike these computer monitors, you got to shift the stuff around, and you know, the worth it part is always a cost issue. So could someone give us an impression about the value of doing virtual reality in this mode and using these 3D headsets?
Yeah. Caitlin, you want me to take that from a value stream perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear, Donnie, from both you and Brock from this side. Obviously, being with transfer, you know, I'm going to be able to tell a story of why I think it's valuable, but I do think coming from both of y'all, it's helpful to get your insight.
Yeah, and Gregory, I want to say something right up front. I only get a 10% commission off of everything that Caitlin sells as I'm speaking about. No, I'm joking. The reality is, and Brock and Caitlin both know how we operate in our workforce system. If it's not a value, we don't play with it. We don't have time. We've got such a crisis in workforce development. And we have seen ways that you can take this. Another prime example. I can take 5 from this school. We're using 10 from another school that just bought. We bought 10 ourselves, and we're going out. And so then when we're not doing our exploration project, we actually will integrate those into those classrooms as well. So the way to maximize these is absolutely phenomenal. Another example is, let's say, for example, right now we have 5 that's going to be launched in each one of our modern manufacturing courses. But let's say, for example, that they're not using it in one day. They could use it in another course or another classroom. So when you look at the value add, when you take and look at a CNC classroom, opening up a CNC classroom can cost a school system in the upwards of $500,000 to $1 million. And a set of 20 headsets is just a fraction of that. So it really has a value add. And then when you add it into an existing classroom like we're doing, and I just explained a minute ago, it actually, your outcomes is well worth the additional outcomes, and the student engagement is well worth the investment as what we call a supplemental or augmented piece of the instruction. So I would say from a customer perspective that it's one of the best investments that you can use, because you can use it as a launch platform, you can use it as a supplemental platform, or like we're seeing is some of our industries actually want to use it in their training rooms, because this is the other part in industry 2.0 and 4.0 as we're training now, is it changes every 6 months. And so technology is moving in such a way, you've got to be able to move your platforms that quickly. And this is one way to do it.
So I will tell you from a K-12 standpoint, the biggest hurdle in anything or any initiative that you're going to try to do is the funding. So anytime that you can reach out to, when I was at Charles Henderson, we got a WIOA grant, in-school youth WIOA grant. We were able to apply some of those funds. With the rollout of Perkins 5, as most of you guys know, that it was not an extra pot of money, but it was 4 more grades that they had to deliver career tech education. So from my perception or perspective of LBW, I went to all our local superintendents and said, hey, keep your money in in 9 through 12 allow me to use my resources, transfer VR, virtual reality goggles, to go in and provide career exploration in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. The reason why that's so important is because right now we're trying to create awareness, explore options, and prepare students all 9th through 12th grade for what's out there after high school in industry. It's too short of a time. So this allows us to go in to our middle schools at no cost to the K-12 system and provide that service for them. And it helps us better align ourselves with these students when they start dual enrollment. The good thing about Alabama is the state legislation allows us to provide free dual enrollment in CTE for anyone who wants to go in a career pathway. So those partnerships that we are able to get with industry, K-12, our local city, county officials are tremendously important, and any type of initiative that we roll out will always have those industries or those entities involved, because that's where your funding will come from. And you don't necessarily have to write a check every time. You can get creative on some things.
Yep.
Yeah,
Well said.
I
Our
I
schools
want
are
to pick
using.
up on something, Brock, before you leave the subject, because our colleague John Yokelson was asking, how are training opportunities being marketed? Is this career awareness part of the sharing the good news about these employment opportunities and training?
It is. We actually have an entire strategy that goes all the way from pre-K all the way through. Just last year, we had over an 18% increase in enrollment in career technical education across the spectrum of our region, which is about 7,500 square miles. And so when you look at that type of an increase in an education program, it really shows that when you integrate it all the way down, all the way from, alignment with our kindergarten, and they to graduate from kindergarten, you have to be able to do the great American handshake and look somebody in the eye. And it's when you integrate it in part of your education system, then you see these fruits come forth. Just throwing it out there and saying, hey, we want to, throw it on the wall and see if it sticks. It's not. It has to be something that's a part of your culture and a change in your cultural aspect of your education program. It can't be your counselors and your career coaches. It's got to be integrated within your entire education process. And that's what's so important about these types of programs is it takes the rising tide, like Caitlin had on her slide. It really takes the rising tide to float those young boats, which are little faces, if you can picture that as it's children. It's making a difference in the lives of young people.
Let me add
Greg, one more point before we jump off of here, and then Brock. So if you look at the actual average cost to train somebody in Alabama, it's upwards of $3,500. So if you're looking at the amount of people that you could actually get trained in a given year with the virtual reality, it's upward of 50,000 people. And that would only cost you $10,000. So if you just do the quick math on that from a return on investment, you can really see just the power that can have over the return on investment, bottom line, just overall cost that you guys are spending on training to place people in jobs.
One thing, Caitlin, I want to express one more opportunity that we provide our individuals within our region with virtual reality. We just launched what we call the Alabama Rise program. It is a program specifically for individuals with disabilities. And a lot of times when I go out and talk to business and industry, there's always question. There's also some nervousness about hiring individuals with disabilities. So with this program, we're looking at trying to put them in headsets during their senior year, provide the companies with the data to back up interest and aptitude for individuals with disabilities, so that these companies can feel a little bit better within their company to hire these individuals, because I believe the individuals with disabilities are the answer to our workforce issues and workforce participation rate.
Your point about the performance data is one that I want to pick up on real quick, and I know we're pretty much out of time, but to Greg's question about the difference between using a virtual environment with immersive goggles and hands-on controllers, that performance measurement and data coming out of that the employers have confidence in strikes me as an absolutely critical component. And I think that's something that our audience here would be interested in hearing a little bit more about, how that performance assessment in the virtual environment has received acceptance from employers, and how that aspect has worked out with this technology.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there is a mastery and data in the back end. So you can actually see how long it's taking somebody to complete certain skill sets, at what level they mastered. So it could be gold, bronze, or silver, just based on how quickly they were able to do it, how long it took them to understand the skill sets. There are different simulations, is what we call them, within each module. So you could have like 28 different simulations, which is 28 different set of skill sets that you would need to know within precision measurement to qualify as like understanding that skill set. Basically what we do is have the students complete at mastery, which is at least 90% of those actual training simulations. From there, they have to be able to prove that to an industry employer, right? So they actually go in front of an employer and show that they know exactly what they're doing and what they're actually able to do with the skills that they learned through virtual reality. So there always is that component to making sure that they physically touch something and are able to communicate that they can do that skill on the job.
Yeah, Michael, I'm a country boy. I didn't
virtually.
Yeah, I'm a country boy and didn't do it that way. I took 10 plant managers and had Caitlin in a room and put them all on a headset. And when they got off of it, they said, we're in, we believe it. I mean, that's the power. Yeah, that's the power of what we're talking about. And and people are excited about it. That's the other thing. When has been the last time you've seen a lot of industry excited about, how do I get more engaged in this? How do I buy this? I'm not joking about this. I just got an email from Pfeiffer Wire, which was one of the logos, and they said, put me in for 5. By the way, Caitlin, I just made a sale for you. He said, put me in for 5 of these for Fayette High School. And they're going to, the industries are buying it for them. So the proof's in the pudding when industry starts saying, we're going to start purchasing these to get them in the K-12 system, because they know what they need as an employer. And I thought that was phenomenal just to get this while we were talking. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, and Michael, I think the biggest thing is industry is obviously seeing that it's working, right? Like there's been a lot of hesitation, I think, within virtual reality, and is this actually effective? Now that we have shown that so many people have gotten hired and they've proven that they can do these skill sets, I think that you're starting to see basically what Donnie just had happen, which is so exciting, of these industry partners coming to us and saying, wow, I actually see the difference between somebody who went through this training and somebody that didn't. And I want to make sure that I get people who actually went through the training because they've been more successful on the job and honestly understood exactly what I needed when they started day one.
Well, I'm looking at the clock here and seeing that our time's up a little bit over. It's a shame if we were to consider this to be our one time to get to talk, but I can't imagine that we'll let this be anything more than our introduction to each other. And I'll just thank Caitlin, Brock, and Donnie, and of course our friends at RTI Associates, particularly Gene Snodgrass and Cameron, for doing a lot of work behind the scenes. Michael, what do you think?
It's been fantastic. Thank you guys for joining us and sharing a really impactful technology in practice, gaining acceptance. And as Craig said, I see this as an introduction. We'll certainly be in touch. Thank you.
Last word, Emily.
I'm going to quote our IACME, Manufacturing Innovation Institute, EWD director, as she says of the closing chat box, this is amazing. What a model. We'll be seeing a lot more of you guys. Thank you so much. It's been a long time coming transfer, but we finally got there. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.